Well, welcome everyone back to Canada, a user's guide and owner's manual. It's been another bloody, bizarre, crazy week in the world of politics and geopolitics. And thanks, Prairie, for joining us, and Charlene, and so many others who are joining with us tonight. You know, we've seen the Romanian Supreme Court has ruled the election is canceled in Romania because, well, they didn't get the results that they liked. And that was one strange thing this week. But we also saw the utter and total collapse of Syria within a couple of days in the last, just on the weekend. And what I saw on Twitter today that crypto has lost $813 million today. So, and of course, let's not forget our good friend Justin Trudeau has now decided that semi-automatic guns, another 300 and some models of semi-automatic guns, need to be coughed up and are now prohibited because he wants to send them over to the Ukraine. So that's just a few of the crazy things that are happening in our country this week. But tonight we're going to speak about an aspect of our parliamentary democracy that many people are unaware of. And that is that our parliaments and our legislature are not only our form of government, but they are indeed a court. They act just like a court. So stay tuned for tonight's episode of Canada, a user's guide and owner's manual. And this week's episode is, pardon me, our parliaments are a court. To this week's edition of Canada, a user's guide and owner's manual. In this week's episode, we're going to examine the very basic functions and design, the foundation of our legislatures and parliaments. We'll start with this very interesting aspect. Parliament is a word derived from the French word parler, which is a place to meet and speak. But many Canadians don't understand our parliaments are not just a place to meet and speak. They are an actual court. They are designed exactly like a court of law. However, instead of finding a solution or remedy to a private dispute between individuals, our parliaments and legislatures are designed to find remedies to disputes within society. We have an adversarial system in our parliaments, just like we do our courts. The plaintiff and defendant are now the government and the opposition. Our parliaments and legislatures still retain the authority to compel people, summons people to attend. They can compel people to speak under oath, and they can also levy penalties, including incarceration, for those who do not abide by the demands of our legislatures.
The news cycle has been absolutely insane lately.
Canadian influencer Lauren Chen has hundreds of thousands of followers, but her channels have been taken off YouTube after allegations of Kremlin manipulation surfaced. The Russians allegedly bankrolled a shell company believed to be Tenet Media and directed the owners to create content that supported Donald Trump and to sow discord. Tenet was started by Chen and her husband Liam Donovan. The couple have a registered company in Hudson, Quebec, and have hired other right-wing influencers.
I'm asking Canadians, will you comply if there's another lockdown?
Among them, fellow Canadian Lauren Southern, who has railed against COVID measures, immigrants, and trans rights. Neither Lauren Chen, her husband, nor Lauren Southern are named in this indictment. They also have not been charged, and the Mounties won't say if they've opened an investigation.
I understand Lauren Chen has declined our invitation to attend, and so I would like to bring forward a motion that the committee summon Lauren Chen to appear for no less than 2 hours in relation to the study of Russian-backed interference and far-right disinformation campaigns intended to manipulate the Canadian public, and that she appear before November 8th.
Failure to comply ultimately was a contempt of Parliament.
Right.
And anyway, so are we ready to vote on this?
Yep.
So all in favor of issuing the summons? I think that's pretty unanimous.
In the indictment, it outlines that you wrote 25 opinion articles for Russia Today. Can you confirm that?
For the reasons already given, I have no comment.
Mr. Chair, given the lack of response, I move that the committee ask the witness be compelled to respond to our questions.
In light of the witness's continued refusal to answer questions of a House of Commons standing committee, I believe it's time for me to move a motion that would authorize you as our chair to refer this back to the House of Commons, clearly indicating that we have a witness that is in contempt.
I had previously given notice of motion on this study that the committee summon Liam Donovan and Lauren Southern to testify on their own for no less than 2 hours on their participation in Russian-backed interference and far-right disinformation campaigns intended to manipulate the Canadian public. You went to Russia, if I'm not mistaken, you were barred from going to the UK, is that correct?
Yes, I was barred from going to the UK.
And why was that?
That was because I tried to set up a pride parade in Luton, and the Islamic population there typically are not a big fan of that. And I was told that it was stirring up hatred.
And so you went to Russia to stir up hatred against Jews?
So join me this week as we get really down into the crux of what the design and the function of our parliaments are in Canada, and so we can find a way to solve this broken machine called politics, called government in Canada. Well, joining me tonight as well is Leigh Stewy. Let's bring Leigh Stewy on to the show. Nice to see you, Leigh.
Hi, Randy. Good to have you. Thank you for another stream, number 8, episode 8, and I think it's the last one of the year before the new year. And I'm just going to go through some housekeeping before we get started here. And so if it's your first time joining or watching the stream, the last portion of the stream is going to be Randy answering your questions that were submitted to his website at randyhillier.com/ask a question. But if you didn't get a chance to do that prior to the stream, you can send in a super chat on YouTube, and we'll also get to those at the last portion of the stream. If you're watching this on the replay or you use another platform other than YouTube and want to donate to this show, which is self-funded, not sponsored by Russia, you can also donate to Randy's website at nomorlockdowns/donate. And are you doing a Twitter space at 9:30?
And we are doing the Twitter space on No More Lockdowns as well after the show. And yeah, I guess I'm going to have to get on the phone and see if Mr. Putin will send us over some money to keep the show.
I know. I'm still waiting. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe I should call up Lauren and see if how to get that done. But
so I guess let's get started. How is Parliament and the legislature a court?
Well, I wanted to bring up the actual legislation to show people. It's in Ontario. It's called the Legislative Assembly Act, and just show some people this is an aspect of our parliamentary democracy that even many of the elected people are completely unaware that our legislatures and parliaments retain this what's called a court of record, and we have all or very similar jurisdictions as a criminal court. So I don't know, maybe we can bring up the Legislative Assembly Act and just go through a couple sections of it and show people that we're not just talking out blowing stuff out of you know where, that this is the actual law. Let's see if we where's our Legislative Assembly Act? Here we go. So there we let's start at number 46, or okay, 30. Let's start at 35, whichever. So if people can read that, Section 35 of the Legislative Assembly Act indicates that the Assembly has the power to compel attendance of witnesses and documents, and they can also issue a warrant against anyone and to compel them to attend to the Assembly, as well as to bring documents as well. So that's just the start, but let's go down to Section 46 here, and people will start seeing the actual language. And there it is under jurisdiction. The Assembly has all the rights and privileges of a court of record for the purpose of summarily inquiring into and punishing as breaches of privilege or contempts. And then it starts listing after, in clause 1, what some of the things are that the Assembly can summarily inquire into and to punish people for. As we can see there, assaults and threats are obvious, but here bribery and offering of a fee, that's an interesting one as well. If anyone offers somebody money to influence an elected member, and how often does that happen, and how seldom does it get punished, but also for drafting bills. And I've already explained on this show a number of examples where money was exchanged with our political parties to advance bills, and also that you cannot give false evidence, or just like in a court of law, that would be perjury. So all those things are available to our parliaments to utilize. And as we just saw in some of those clips, Lauren Chen and Lauren Southern has felt some of the authority of Parliament. But the other reason why I wanted to talk about this subject, Leigh, was because our parliaments are a court. They have the same design, the same functions. You have an adversarial system.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I think we're back. I'm not
Are you
sure what's
back?
going
Okay.
on. But we have the adversarial system, and then we have the speaker who acts something like a judge. But where a lot of people don't realize, at the end of the day, our parliaments are our highest court because our parliaments create law as well as punish, where ordinary courts cannot create law. And a lot of people, a lot of Canadians don't realize that is how you should be looking at things, and as well as that you, the voter, the electorate, is the jury in this parliamentary court. Now, we only get to announce our verdict on the actions that happened in the parliamentary courts once every 4 years, through the way of the ballot. There are other means to for the jurors, the electorate to make themselves known and be heard in between those 4-year votes. But like any jury, we have a job to do, and that is to render our approval, our verdict on the behavior and the actions of our political parties. And I think many Canadians just aren't, like I said, aren't aware that how much power, because at the end of the day, the court of public opinion is the highest court in our land. We get to choose who will be our representatives, and we get to pass a verdict on them every 4 years if they've acted in our interests or not. And I would think most Canadians would say it's been a while since they've been acting in our best interests.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say that. It's like, can we, it's the debate of whether, we're actually voting people in, or, does it make a difference, the uniparty, that whole thing. But I find that the government is awfully choosy of what sort of issues they want to address within Parliament and who they summons. Because I think there's been, for instance, this Tenet Media thing, they've really kind of honed in on this while letting other issues or other scenarios slide. And so in what situations will they summon people for Parliament for questioning, and can they summon anybody? And do you have a refusal? Like, are you able to refuse to show up? Do you have to go?
Let's take a step back. And in politics, the political parties are playing to the jury, okay? But instead of looking to, and let's remember as well, the Parliament is unlike a civil court or a criminal court where they're looking to find a remedy or a punishment against an individual or solve a individual dispute. They're trying to solve the disputes within the collective society amongst, in our case, 40 million people. And so they're using the parliaments to create a narrative as to which one of these two competing political parties or three competing political parties are acting in the best interest. So it's more theater than it is substance in that regard. But then it becomes very because again they're trying to convince the jurors that I wear the red tie, so the red team is the best, or I wear the blue tie and the blue team is the best in representing your interests. But then you get into the substantive stuff, like what we're seeing with Tenet Media. And there's been other elements of this contempt as well. Like that's just the most current one. There was contempt proceedings earlier, not long ago, over the Chinese scientists who shipped viruses from the Winnipeg lab, and we've never yet seen the full extent and the evidence on that one. But yes, Parliament can compel anyone, in Canada to appear before them, and they have, and if you, as Lauren Southern did, she went, and I think she did a marvelous job of dispelling the narrative that the parliamentary committee was attempting to tarnish her with, that somehow that she was not speaking on her own volition, that she was being paid to propagate a foreign government's message. And how bizarre is that, Leigh? she's facing interrogation over potential foreign interference by very members of the parliament who are also under investigation by CSIS and the RCMP for their foreign entanglements, but they don't want to talk about that. But I think Lauren Southern did an exceptional job dispelling that nonsensical narrative. But Lauren Chen, she took the other route and refused to answer any questions by her, and now she is facing a contempt motion. Now, what will Parliament do with that contempt motion? We're not certain. But if you want to listen, this was pretty evident through the whole. I think she was there for 2 hours.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you too. Who was the smarter of the two of them? Because where does this go after they've been summoned to Parliament and they testify in Parliament? Lauren Southern, put on basically a clinic on how to school the Canadian government, whereas Lauren Chen decided to not even confirm her name to them. So which one of the two of them do you think was playing it smarter, giving up or defending themselves from these allegations or remaining silent? Because where does it go after Parliament?
Well, we can't answer that with certainty because we don't know actually if there was any wrongdoing. We don't know any details, but we know with Lauren Southern, the Parliament is not going to be interested in having her back. She schooled them pretty well. She showed how immature and juvenile and childish the parliamentarians and their inquisition was. And I think so. Lauren also defended her professional integrity and credibility exceptionally well in that testimony, where Lauren Chen, because she took the fifth, as they would say, and refused to answer any question, has put her in not so good a position. I have no idea. I don't know. I've never spoken with her. I don't have any business dealings with her. I have never had any business dealings with Tenet Media. So I don't know what they were doing, what they weren't doing. But I think at a minimum, she is probably hurt her commercial viability somewhat and professional reputation. And now could be facing further sanctions from Parliament, whatever they may be. And now again, we don't know. There is, because the RCMP have not indicated with any certainty whether or not there is a criminal investigation. We're not certain if there's any criminal investigation going on in the States. So in that aspect, she may have been very wise to keep her mouth shut, because anything that she may have said in the parliamentary committee could be used against her in another court of law. So
right. Yeah. And I noticed too in the opening clip there in that news segment, where they played a portion of the Parliament questioning of Lauren Chen. I think it's Rachel, I can't remember her, Dancho or something. She says to Lauren Chen, you're not specifically named in the indictment, but did you do X, Y, and Z? And it's like, well, if Lauren Chen's not even named in the indictment, how do they prove that it's even her that has done something? It's very I think Lauren Chen actually, was smart and not not confirming anything to them because it could further damage. And also that the US government was the one to find these things going on within Canadians that were streaming or having a media company. It wasn't the Canadian government, it was the US government that discovered this.
Well, as we know, Russia from the U.S. government with Biden. So, they're again the Biden administration, like every political party, is trying to promote a narrative, and they've been promoting the Russia narrative for a long time. So, and their reach is far beyond just homeland United States. So clearly they're trying to promote this Russian interference now in Canada as well to support their narrative. Again, only time will tell whether how it turns out for Tenet Media. Again, if there was that crux, like if she said something, it could be used against her in another court. So, that whole saying about don't say anything unless you've got a lawyer present. Probably, may be the appropriate thing for Lauren Chen. So.
Yeah. Have you ever witnessed or been a part of the committee to one of these hearings or had to question anyone in the legislature, Ontario?
Yeah,
legislature?
We had a contempt motion during my time in the legislature with the gas plant scandals. I don't know if you remember that or if the audience will remember, but the Liberal government in Ontario had contracted to build a number of gas turbine run electricity plants in Ontario for hundreds of billions of dollars. And then just before some by-elections, they scrubbed it, and relocated them. But the contractors got paid for building gas plants that they didn't build, so and it was a minority government at the time. And usually these contempts work best during a minority government because a majority government will just squash the opposition's attempts. So we had them over the barrel. The Ontario government had refused the committee's request to turn over all the evidence of the gas plant scandal. And we had a contempt motion filed and adopted. And then, lo and behold, the government orchestrated its downfall. And we had a new election, and the Liberals got back in with a majority government and killed the contempt motion from the previous parliament. That's... So it's certainly not a perfect system by any means, but we thought we had the Liberals over the barrel on that one, and that would have been around 2013 or so, I believe. But it's another odd one was like this one in Winnipeg, where there was a contempt filed and adopted in the previous parliament. Under a minority parliament. Trudeau went and called an early election, but he didn't get back in with a majority. He got back in with another minority, and none of the other political parties have given life to that contempt motion, which that speaks volumes to somebody like myself, and like they could easily have resurrected that contempt motion in a minority parliament, but they've chosen to go on to other things and pretend it didn't happen.
So I think another example of parliament, or in the States, they have pardons, and the United States president can just pardon anyone, and we saw that with Hunter Biden. Joe Biden just pardoning Hunter without even being guilty. So can prime ministers do that as well, or is that just a U.S. thing? Is that a Republican thing, or
Well, it's interesting.
or a
Like that's
republic?
so everything that I just said about our parliaments and legislatures apply to the U.S. as well. And they usually use a term of impeach instead of contempt, but their Congress is a court as well, and they can summon and compel and punish people for failure to do so. The states do one additional thing. They allow the executive branch to also pardon other crimes. In Canada, when we had the death penalty, our executive could also pardon or commute death sentences, but we haven't had the death sentence since I think it was 1972. We got rid of it. But the American executive, the president, continues to have this pardon. Never have we ever seen such an abuse of it in my watching of U.S. politics, because every president always uses that prerogative of pardoning people, usually just before they leave office, and it's has always been for crimes that someone was convicted of. Now, Joe Biden has taken this to all new heights and absurdity, where now he's pardoned his son for a period of time for any crimes committed from 2014 onwards. So Hunter, if I have it correctly, was convicted on 2 counts, but there was a whole host of other potential charges in the wings, and Biden has absolved him of any of these crimes not yet accused or charged. I don't know. I can't think of another time in American history where a president has pardoned people for things that they have not been charged with, let alone convicted.
Yeah, that sounds pretty crazy. Like, oh, he might commit a crime or might be found guilty, so I'm just going to pardon him. That just sounds crazy to me.
Well, of course,
it's overriding the justice system, right?
It is, because it takes it to an absurd level that, let's just pretend for a moment that wasn't Hunter Biden, but it was somebody else. How could you possibly know? How could anyone possibly know what other activities or actions that person may have been involved with during that period of time? So how could you, it's just absurd to give somebody a pardon without, under those circumstances. It would be like, okay, well, Diddy's been charged with a bunch of things from a period of time, but we're also going to pardon him for things that happened 10 years earlier or whatnot. And of course, with Hunter, we know that there is significant skullduggery with Burisma and Ukraine, and the Meta bioweapons labs. There's a whole host of evidence that he was involved in a great many shady dealings. So, you know, what can I say? But if there's no mechanism that I'm aware of, yeah, there's a good comment up. He may have pardoned his son for murder without knowing,
Or
'cause
knowing.
yeah, well, or knowing, but you know, and it's wouldn't be surprising that even Sleepy Joe wouldn't know everything that that his son had been up to. He uh, hardly knows how to get off the stage many days, so he may have forgotten more than what he remembers about his son's actions in the past.
Yeah, I think it's also important to bring up Trump as well. And there's his last time in office as the president, he pardoned a black rapper and some Israeli spies. And this year, it's like, will he pardon the January 6th prisoners? That's a hot topic right now, whether he will do that, and how is he choosing the people that he's pardoning? It's very interesting.
Well, so really, there's, this again is a legacy authority from what we would use the term the royal prerogative. In much earlier days, the king or queen could always absolve anyone of any crime. And so over time, that royal prerogative remains with the White House. We've altered it. Our parliaments could, we still have a pardon system in Canada, but it's not so overtly partisan. It's more bureaucratic than it is partisan. And it's more of a money-making machine than it is anything else. But that's the legacy of it from the royal prerogative. But it was meant to, like all laws, it was meant to be utilized by people with integrity. It was meant to be utilized to undo a wrong or an error that courts made, because courts make errors. We've seen many examples of that. And that this would be utilized in a non-partisan fashion with integrity. So, my view is that the January 6th protesters, a great many of them, were convicted for partisan reasons. I think that's anybody who looks at things objectively would come near to that conclusion. So pardoning the J6 guys, I think, would be a proper thing for Donald Trump to do. Just as I think that granting a pardon to Julian Assange and Eric Snowden, I think those are two great Americans that have faced the outrageous abuses of the legal system there. So I think that would be, again, in my view, a proper use of a pardon. And it's for crimes, but I wouldn't suggest that he pardoned Julian Assange for things that he wasn't accused of or convicted of.
Right.
Yeah.
We got a super chat. Thank you, David. We'll get to your question at the very end, and I just want to remind everyone to smash the thumbs up because it does help with the algorithm, and share the stream out to all your friends or family that want to learn more about the Canadian government. I want to bring it back to another example of the Parliament being a court, and I think that a very hot topic as well during COVID or after the convoy was the POEC. And what was the difference between the POEC and something that we're seeing with like Lauren Chen or Lauren Southern?
Well, so very similar, and yeah, thanks for hit the like and share and send some questions in. We are going to get to a few more, but we'd love to answer questions that people have on their mind. So it's interesting, the POEC, if people remember, the Public Orders Inquiry Commission that is mandated. The law states that if the government is ever to enact the Emergency Act, they must evaluate their actions by way of a committee afterwards. And so we have that aspect. Another important and similar was also a judicial review of the Emergency Act by Justice Mosley. But let's just look at the POEC first, because that was such a bizarre. It was made to appear to everyone that it was a court, but it was a parliamentary committee, and so it doesn't have all the same rules of due process as an ordinary court, and. First off, the POEC. Let's start off with the very first. It was more of a kangaroo court, both in their process and in their decision making. And why I say that process, although people could be compelled to attend, and people could be compelled to provide testimony under oath. The POEC refused to actually call witnesses to the event. So this, and I'll say this: many people may not realize this, but none of the political people who attended the Freedom Convoy were permitted to give testimony at the POEC. All sides within the POEC said, no, we don't want to hear testimony from Maxime Bernier. We don't want to hear testimony from Brian Peckford or Derek Sloan or Randy Hillier. We'll just pretend that those people were not there and have nothing to contribute to this testimony. But it wasn't just the politicians. In Ottawa, there was also a great number of academics and pastors and physicians who all were very key and central and involved. So I'll give you some of the names, like Dr. Roger Hodkinson, Dr. Paul Alexander, Dr. Chris Shoemaker. There was a whole host of physicians, like politicians, who Justice Rollo and the both sides, the plaintiffs and the respondents, refused to call. Same with pastors like Henry Hildebrand. All of these people would have been, had ringside seats and were quite intimately involved. They were involved in press conferences. They were involved on the stage. They were, and who knows what else they were involved in.
Bruce Party is another one.
Bruce Party is, yeah. And Julie Panesse. There's quite a long list of professionals, of academics, physicians, and politicians who this apparently inquiry refused to hear testimony from. And I know I've spoken to all those people, and many of them had their name either put forward by others, or they had requested standing at the committee because they had something to offer. Instead, let's not hear this side of the story during the POEC. So it was a kangaroo court in that aspect, just because the court is meant to find truth, and you can't just remove all kinds of people who were there and say their testimony is not valuable in this exercise. But I think we have a clip, because the other real the proof point for this kangaroo court of the POEC is Justice Rollo's final decision. And maybe we could bring up and play the last minute of that video clip where Rollo makes his decision about the POEC after not hearing from so many people.
Some parties have argued that I should not opine on the appropriateness of the decision. After careful reflection, I have concluded that the very high threshold required for the invocation of the Act was met. In particular, for reasons that I discuss in detail in the report, I have concluded that when the decision was made to invoke the Act on February 14th, 2022, Cabinet had reasonable grounds to believe that there existed a national emergency arising from threats to the security of Canada that necessitated the taking of special temporary measures. I do not come to this conclusion easily, as I do not consider the factual basis for it to be overwhelming. Reasonable and informed people could reach a different conclusion than the one I have arrived at.
That's the important part.
Reasonable.
Reasonable and informed people
a different conclusion than the one I have arrived at.
That would reach a different conclusion than this judge. Now, just ask yourselves, what he's saying, a reasonable and informed person could come to a different conclusion. So, is Justice Rollo saying that he is an unreasonable and uninformed individual after listening to all this testimony? This is, and I was just astonished that nobody in the media picked up on this, this glaring hypocrisy of Justice Rollo. Again, because it's gave all the appearance of a court. Can you imagine a court saying, well, yeah, Leigh Stewy, we find you guilty, but a reasonable and informed person would come to a different conclusion than me.
Sounds like you're pretty unreasonable.
Yeah. But, and then we contrast that with the actual court of Mosley's decision that came in February of, was it February of 23? I think it was February of 23. Yes. And now instead of having, we had professional counsel there bringing forth testimony from who they thought were the best witnesses. And Mosley came to a very different conclusion of Rollo, that the federal government had not met the threshold that was required in the statute to implement the Emergency Act. So, and of course, we also know that that the government announced that they were going to appeal that, but we've not seen anything come to that. And I suspect that it will be a very high bar for the government to get Mosley's judicial review overturned. But we'll wait and see. But that's
I saw they were trying to. There was a group trying to overturn using that ruling to overturn the decision about the Emergency Measures Act and to hold them accountable for that. But I didn't see any result with that. I don't know if it got removed or.
No, I think Mosley's decision will come into, and I think it has come into play. It's helped shift the mindset of other courts and shift the attitudes of other courts. And I think it will have more to bear in time. But it's, we'll just have to wait and see on that. But, that's, I think it's really important at the end of the day, like people can make a difference. Like you are, like I said, the court of public opinion is powerful, and I think it's also playing out in the impact on a number of the criminal cases in Ottawa. Not all of them, but we've seen a few more cases in the appeals court and a few more in the lower courts where the changing public attitudes are helping to shift the courts. I think hopefully next year we'll be able to pass a strong verdict on these political parties and show them that the court of public opinion is not pleased with the way they've behaved in the last number of years, and they deserve to be given the heave-ho. But that'll be up for the people to decide.
Right, and hopefully there's still some oath-keeping judges out there who are willing to be fair and not, toe the party lines, as so to speak, and act on their oath and not what their higher ups may tell them to do.
Well, I think it's more about public influence and public opinion is important. Like, as well as unique circumstances are as well. I've often mentioned, like, Mosley is what's called a supernumerary judge. He is retired, and he only comes back for to pick up cases. So he can't climb the ladder any further. So where Rollo, he still wants to climb the ladder. The hierarchy of the judicial system. So, he would not want to jeopardize his potential rise. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was just appointed to a higher court in the last couple of weeks. I should have looked that up today, but I'm certain of this, that Rollo just got a big promotion. And that's, people have to understand that those are the carrots that government can hold out to influence people's decisions and what and how they behave.
Toe the line and you'll get a promotion.
Total line or get the boot.
Yeah, or that.
It's not just the elected members who understand that concept. There are judges and crowns and various people as well who are easily enticed with the carrots and the patronage of government.
All right, so we've hit the 9 o'clock mark here, and we want to get to some questions from you guys, and the super chat sent in by David. Thank you so much for your $10 donation. Like I said, we're not sponsored by Russia, so this goes a long way for us. David says, thank you for a great show. Watched 8 out of 8 now, our new Monday night tradition. Is there an appeal process if Parliament finds someone in contempt?
No. Thank you, David. That's a good question. It is probably the only court. I'm not sure if our stream is. Are we back on?
I think you're a tiny bit laggy, but I can still hear you and see you.
Okay. Well, let me start again, Dave. And thanks for watching. But yeah, Parliament is the only court. Every other court, except the Supreme Court, you can appeal. But in Parliament, a decision by Parliament is final and binding, and can't be appealed.
Interesting. And Lauren Southern made a good point in her interrogation, if you want to call it, about how much disinformation the MPs had against her, and nothing was corrected, or the person who was initially giving the information, there was never any fact checking on what they were saying in regards to how many subscribers the channel had, how many how much money they were making. And I think that's pretty dangerous. They're told all this information, they just kind of take it at face value. So MPs who are making these decisions kind of just have this preconceived notion on who you are or what you're doing, and they don't ever look into it, A, because they don't have time, or B, because they just trust the source and don't look into it any further. And I think that can be pretty dangerous.
I think. Well, again, anybody who watched that, the caliber of the inquisitors was pretty childish. But there is another a bit of a contradiction in our parliamentary courts. There is, although it would be against the law to provide false testimony, as we saw in that. When we showed the act, you could be punished for perjury, or if you provided forged documents or fraudulent documents. But there is no such obligation on the members of Parliament who are doing the Inquisition. They can say essentially anything that they want. They're held from any, they're immune from any defamation or any other civil action for what they say. And there's, so you could see all this phony baloney BS being propagated by our parliamentarians with absolute impunity. So
that's a pretty slippery slope. I don't ever want to have to deal with.
Again, the system was built on a belief that only people of high integrity would ever be elected, and we found out that's not quite true.
I know.
Integrity is a very rare commodity, I would say, in our parliaments these days.
Right. And I think it's partially our fault too. We've kind of taken the back burner on holding politicians accountable for so long that they just think that they can get away with it with no repercussions, because we haven't been hard enough on them, I don't think.
That is absolutely true. We've did I just see another?
Let me see here. Yes.
another-
A $2 donation. Do you think there will be another Freedom Convoy? Thank you for your donation. Zixor. Zsor?
Now, how would you ever know how to pronounce that name? I was looking at that name and I said, Zizor or Exor or anyway. I don't think there will be more protests. That I have no doubt about. And will they be as large or as substantive as the Freedom Convoy? I suspect they will be. They may not take the same form and shape. Maybe they will. Like we've seen our governments continue to bring in outrageous policies, things, so I suspect so. I don't know when, in what form or shape they will be, but I have, unless some miracle happens, and the Canadian voters decide that they don't want to keep choosing and electing corrupt, dishonorable political parties, I think there's no question that there will be greater protests down the road.
Yeah, I don't see another convoy happening. In my opinion, I don't see in that form anyways. I see it getting to another boiling point and people being very unhappy.
It could be tractors. It could be, who knows what it could be. But our governments are acting in a very predatory fashion, and I suspect that they're going to go too far once again, unless we give them a real good check in the next general election. If we make them pay and understand that they did wrong, and they're not going to get away with it. If we don't do that, then expect worse policies down the road. Yeah, Freedom March. That's the protests can take a lot of different shapes and styles. So, and Canadians can be very creative and imaginative when it comes to protests.
Maybe another political party like they did in Quebec, the Revolutionary Party.
It's we'll wait and see. We'll see how governments respond and how fast they move with this agenda. And we're jumping like you started off at the beginning of the show, like governments around the world, in the Western world anyway, are on a path of irrational behavior. So let's not be surprised that they'll come up with something stupid again soon.
And we are Canadian after all, so we do have that in our blood. We can only take so much before we get really super pissed off.
Maybe there'll be another Upper and Lower Canada rebellion. Who knows?
There you go. All right, so I'm going to get to the questions from the website that were submitted during the week from last Monday up until today. Let's see here. Shelley Thomas left feedback and said, why is the province of Quebec in our House of Commons voting on matters contained in a constitution that they never signed?
So I wanted to answer this one because there's such a degree of nonsense and misunderstanding by many people in Canada that because Quebec did not sign the Constitution in 1982, that somehow either the Constitution is invalid or Quebec's participation in our confederation is invalid. But they agreed to the Constitution in 1867, just to remind everyone. And that they are a founding partner, one of the original founding partners of this confederation. So they are Canadian. There's no question about that. But to speak specifically to 1982, Quebec took that matter to the highest court, the Supreme Court, and challenged the validity of the 1982 Constitution because they had not signed and ratified it. And the Supreme Court ruled that we did not require unanimity of all provinces to repatriate the Constitution in 1982, just as we don't require unanimity to amend the Constitution today. The broad stroke amending formula is that 7 provinces with at least 50% of the population can amend the Constitution. So, if we wanted to amend the Constitution again today, we could do it without Quebec's ratification, but it doesn't mean that they are not part of Canada. It doesn't mean that they don't have or ought not to have representation in the House of Commons because they are disagreeable to an amendment. So I hope that answers your question, Shelley, and it shouldn't bother you that Quebec is in the House of Commons and has seats in the House of Commons, and that they disagreed with Pierre Elliott Trudeau in 1982. Maybe
personally, I'm not concerned about the people of Quebec voting in our House of Commons, but rather the people who hold dual citizenships, who aren't only Canadian, voting on matters in our parliament. That concerns me a little.
Well, so I understand the sentiment, Leigh, but I would say to you, the people that have caused far the worst damage in our House of Commons are not those who hold dual citizenship. And I would point my finger directly at Justin Trudeau, and I would also point my finger at Pierre Poilievre, and there'd be many, many people that I could point my finger at in the House of Commons who are not dual citizens. Now, not that I don't think it's, how should I say this? I wouldn't mind if the law said that you couldn't be a dual citizen, other than a lot of people don't understand this real interesting nuance in Canada. There is a great many Canadians who were born and raised on border towns where the hospitals were in the United States. And so a pregnant Canadian woman living in, let's say, Fort Frances, where the closest hospital is across the border in the States, it's very commonplace along in many of these border towns for Canadians to, Canadian moms to have their child in the United States. And those people are dual citizens. Do we want to exclude them from Canadian from elected office? I don't, like I said, I wouldn't mind, but I think our biggest problem is our Canadian elected representatives, personally.
All right. So Murray left feedback on Ask a Question that says, "Hi, Randy. With the prospect of an Ontario election in the not so distant future, I ask myself who is worthy of my vote. Doug Ford and his gang screwed you and others over, so they are out. The Libs are crooks, and NDP are jagmeets, shills, and corrupt. So who is really left? Any suggestions as to who might be different and maybe worthy? I respect your opinion and knowledge. Thanks for all you do."
Well, thank you, Murray. Ontario, we're in a bit of we're not in a good spot here in Ontario, and Ford is pushing. I have no doubt we will see an Ontario election probably either in June, probably June. It may be as late as the late summer, but Ford wants to get another 4-year term in under his belt, and take advantage of the hatred against Justin Trudeau for his own political fortunes, even though one's federal, one's provincial. Many Canadian voters conflate federal and provincial politics, and and I think right here at the moment, anyway, in Ontario, I think the best thing that the voters can do is show their disdain for Ford by voting for independent candidates. I don't, and I think that would also maybe help demonstrate to other people that there is a growing opposition, and that growing opposition should gel together in a more cohesive and unified fashion. So I know unless something changes between now and election day, I'll be looking at the independent candidates and some of the smaller fringe parties, the Freedom Party, the Libertarian Party, and show my support for those. But the established parties, they're certainly they were all a part and parcel in this. And just remember, Ford will go for an election in 25, a full year and a half before he needs to. He's going to the election, an early election, not for the benefit of the voters, but for the benefit of himself and the Conservative Party.
Yeah, I noticed he's doing the no tax thing for Ontario as well. So that's part of probably he's early campaigning.
Well, this is how much politicians, the contempt that they hold for people. Ford has announced his $250 check for everyone. And you can ask yourself, well, why, here we are, we're $10 billion in debt. He's going to issue every one of the 14 million people in the province a $250 check. It's going to cost us another $3 billion that we don't have, that's going to be added to the public debt. And our children and grandchildren will be paying the interest on that for a good long time. But that's, he views, and the Conservative Party views, that the voter is so unsophisticated that we can buy them with a $250 check. Just as Trudeau is saying that the voter is so immature and unsophisticated that we can buy our votes with a HST holiday for a couple of weeks. So, again, for the audience, it doesn't matter. There's a Conservative Party and there's a Liberal Party, both engaged in the same trickery and recognize, and both having the same contemptuous view of voters.
I think that's a great point to end it on. We're at the end here. And I just want to remind everyone that there's a X space or a Twitter space after this stream on the No More Lockdowns account. You can go there at 9:30, and Randy will be over there chatting away about probably some more politics and recent current events. And I think I just also want to mention I want to shout out to the Homeschool Association of Ontario, who have been watching our episodes, all 8 of them. So the homeschool crowd there, Just want to say thank you so much for watching and participating, and we hope you're learning.
Well, listen, thank you, Leigh, and thanks everybody for tuning in. We are going to take a bit of a break over the Christmas, and so I'm going to say Merry Christmas to everyone, and
yes, Merry
Happy
Christmas.
New Year. And if you'd like to support the show, go to No More Lockdowns. We will be on the Twitter space or X space. If you're not following No More Lockdowns, I've posted it on my X account at Randy Hillier, but the No More Lockdowns account is at NML_Canada. Send some questions. We'll be happy to get to them again. And if you want to follow the uncensored version as well, follow me on Substack, randyhillier.substack.com. And of course, if you'd like to come to Scuttlebutt Lodge or to support the production of Canada, a User's Guide and Owner's Manual, visit nomorlockdowns.ca. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Leigh. And
Thank you so much.
And
We'll see you next year.
Right on. Bye-bye.